welcome to another deep dive. This time you guys have sent in some really fascinating stuff. We're talking about men's experiences in today's world, particularly when it comes to relationships and family.
Yeah, definitely hitting on some sensitive topics here.
We've got excerpts from a book that doesn't hold back. It really seems to be speaking directly to men who kind of, feeling like things aren't quite right, like something's off.
What I find really interesting about this book is that it doesn't just focus on personal anecdotes. It connects those individual experiences to larger societal trends, which I think is really important.
I totally agree. It's like it's trying to help guys see the bigger picture, right? To understand the forces that are shaping their lives, even if they're not always aware of them.
Exactly. It's encouraging us to think critically, to question those dominant narratives that we're often presented with, especially when it comes to gender and power.
Speaking of narratives, this source definitely has a strong one. It doesn't beat around the bush. It dives right into the deep end by arguing that modern marriage is essentially a rigged game for men.
Yeah, it uses some pretty startling statistics about divorce rates and the financial outcomes for men after a split.
Like, it even claims that 97% of alimony payers are men. I mean, that's a pretty huge number.
It really makes you think about the power dynamics at play, doesn't it?
For sure. And it goes beyond just statistics. It presents these alternative relationship models like cohabitation agreements.
Yeah, and living apart together, which is kind of a new concept for a lot of people.
LAT, yeah.
Yeah.
The source actually gives some real-life examples of couples who've had success with these arrangements. Like, there's this couple, Mark and Lisa. They thrived for years under a cohabitation agreement. And when they decided to separate, it was amicable. No legal battles or financial drain.
It's interesting because the source isn't necessarily saying that traditional marriage is wrong for everyone, but it's definitely advocating for men to be more proactive, more strategic about protecting their interests within relationships. Like, don't just blindly accept the traditional model without question.
Right, right. And it also gets into this concept of hypergamy, which is basically the idea that women are naturally drawn to partners with higher status.
And this isn't presented as some kind of judgment. It's more like, hey, this is a biological reality. It's always been there. But today's social media-driven culture kind of amplifies it.
Yeah, it's like everyone's constantly comparing themselves to others, which can create these totally unrealistic expectations.
Exactly. And that can lead to a lot of frustration and disappointment, especially for men who are trying to navigate the dating world.
Totally. And speaking of frustration, the source also talks about the nice guy paradox. This idea that just being a good guy doesn't guarantee relationship success.
Which is kind of a tough pill to swallow, right? Like, you'd think being nice would be enough.
You think so?
Yeah.
But it seems like it's not always that simple. The source gives this example of Sarah, who's in a stable relationship with a seemingly good guy, but she finds herself drawn to, this bad boy type.
Which kind of illustrates the whole hypergamy thing we were talking about. It's not always about logic, Sometimes it's about those primal instincts and societal pressures that can really complicate things.
Totally. And the source doesn't sugarcoat it either. It goes on to talk about what it calls the fatherhood crisis, and it paints a pretty bleak picture of fatherhood in the modern world. It's like men are becoming increasingly marginalized as parents.
Yeah, and it ties us back to a larger societal trend that we've been seeing. The decline of the traditional family structure, the questioning of traditional male roles, and all of that.
And it's not just about the men, right?
Right.
It highlights the impact this has on children. Like, there's this statistic about the increased likelihood of kids from single-parent homes engaging in criminal activity, struggling academically, all of those negative consequences.
And it's not just statistics. The source actually shares this really poignant story about John. He's a single dad who's struggling to raise his kids alone after a really messy divorce. And it just illustrates the emotional toll, the burden that fatherlessness can have.
It's a reminder that these issues affect everyone. It's not just a men's issue or a women's issue. It's a societal issue that we need to address collectively.
Now we're entering territory where the source gets particularly controversial, takes on the #MeToo movement, criticizing what it calls a weaponized narrative of victimhood.
Yeah, this is definitely a hot button topic. And the source doesn't hold back.
It acknowledges the initial goal of the movement, holding perpetrators accountable, which is obviously important, but it argues that it's morphed into something that often disregards due process and creates this environment of fear for men.
Men are guilty until proven innocent.
Right, and it specifically points to the case of Aziz Ansari, the comedian. He faced, public shaming over what the source calls a bad date.
It's like the source is saying, hold on, we need to be careful here. Let's not rush to judgment. Let's make sure we're being fair to everyone involved.
It's a delicate balance. It's about believing victims, but also ensuring fairness for the accused.
Speaking of balance, the source goes on to describe what it calls the woke virus, which it claims promotes division, censorship, and a victimhood mentality.
Yeah, it's a pretty strong term. It argues that this ideology, rooted in Marxist critical theory, has kind of seeped into everything. Academia, the media, public discourse, you name it.
And it uses some pretty strong examples to illustrate its point, like cancel culture, and attempts to silence figures like Jordan Peterson. It even criticizes a Gillette ad.
It's definitely thought-provoking. It's like the source is urging us to be wary of any ideology that tries to silence opposition or promote conformity.
Like, think for yourself. Don't just blindly accept the narrative that's being fed to you.
Right. Question everything.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The source doesn't just point out problems. It actually offers solutions. Like, okay, we've identified the issues. Now what can we do about it?
It advocates for personal responsibility, for self-improvement, for setting boundaries in relationships, and for protecting your financial interests.
It also encourages men to find healthy ways to express their masculinity, like join men's groups, find mentors, connect with other guys who get it.
And that's a really important point, because a lot of times men feel isolated. They feel like they're going through these challenges alone.
So it's about building that sense of community, that brotherhood.
Exactly. It's about supporting each other and navigating these challenges together.
I'm particularly intrigued by the source's emphasis on setting boundaries, especially in romantic relationships. It argues that men often sacrifice too much to please their partner.
And that can lead to resentment.
Yeah, and a loss of self-respect.
So it's not selfish to set boundaries. It's actually an act of self-preservation. It's about defining what you're willing to tolerate, what you're not willing to tolerate.
And communicating that clearly to your partner.
Exactly. It's about finding a balance between being a good partner and maintaining your own sense of identity and self-worth.
And this applies to finances too. The source even suggests considering prenups and postnups as a way to protect your financial interests, especially given that statistic about alimony payment. It's like the source is saying, hey, you need to be aware of the risks and take steps to protect yourself.
It's about being smart and being proactive.
Another interesting point the source makes is about the state as a weapon.
Yeah, it's a pretty bold claim. It's basically arguing that certain policies, often influenced by feminist ideology, have essentially weaponized government institutions against men.
There are systemic biases that disadvantage men.
Right, and it points to specific examples like certain domestic violence support programs and family law practices that it believes are detrimental to men's interests.
It definitely makes you question whether these systems that are supposed to promote equality are actually doing that.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack, and it definitely warrants further exploration.
And speaking of controversial issues, the source also delves into this whole moral bankruptcy of the abortion industry.
Yeah, this is one of those topics where people have very strong opinions. The source is definitely critical of the industry, raising some ethical questions about its practices and motivations.
Like the source talks about the emotional and financial manipulation that it claims is prevalent, and the potential psychological impact on women. It even brings up the environmental impact of discarding fetal remains.
It's a lot to process.
And then there's the issue of paternity fraud, which the source calls a silent epidemic. It's like, all these men are unknowingly raising children who aren't biologically theirs, and the legal system often doesn't protect them.
Right. And the source shares this really heartbreaking story about a man who raised a child for 15 years, only to discover through a DNA test that he wasn't the biological father. It just highlights the emotional and financial devastation that can come with paternity fraud.
Yeah, it's a really tough situation. And the source is basically saying, look, this is a real problem. We need to acknowledge it and find ways to prevent it.
It's about protecting men from being exploited.
And we're not just talking about these big societal issues. The source also addresses the everyday challenges that men face in the digital age, like the impact of social media on relationships.
Yeah, it's like social media creates this constant pressure to compare yourself to others, which can really erode intimacy and create unrealistic expectations.
Gives these examples, like there's Tom. His marriage falls apart because his wife is constantly on her phone.
And then there's Mike and Lisa. Their relationship suffers because they're constantly scrolling through Instagram, comparing themselves to other couples.
It's like the source is saying, hey, be mindful of how technology is affecting your relationship. It's not all bad, but it definitely has its downsides.
Yeah, it's about being aware and setting healthy boundaries.
And speaking of technology, the source also dives into this whole world of digital relationships, virtual dating apps, even AI-driven matchmaking services. It's like the future is already here.
It's crazy. It shares the story of Alex, who tries out a virtual dating app, and he finds the whole experience both intriguing and kind of unsettling. Like, where's the line between real and virtual?
The source even mentions a study that found 40% of people are open to the idea of dating a virtual partner. I mean, that's a significant number.
It definitely makes you think about where things are headed. Like, how is technology going to shape the future of human connection?
Big question.
Yeah.
But the source doesn't just focus on the digital world. It also takes a critical look at the education system. It's like It's saying that boys are being failed by an environment that often punishes them for expressing their natural instincts.
Yeah, it argues that boys are more likely to be disciplined, even for minor infractions, and they're often diagnosed with behavioral disorders at a much higher rate than girls.
You give some pretty disturbing examples, like this boy who got expelled from school for drawing a picture of a gun, even though there was no intent to harm.
It's like this zero tolerance policy stuff can really go too far sometimes.
Then there's the media. The source argues that it plays a big role in perpetuating negative stereotypes about men.
Yeah, men are often portrayed as either bumbling idiots or emotionally stunted villains or just like out of control aggressors. Like there's no middle ground.
And the source calls out the whole toxic masculinity narrative. It's like
Yeah.
it's saying, hold on, not all aspects of masculinity are toxic. There are positive traits that we should be celebrating, not demonizing.
It's about finding that balance, recognizing the good and the bad.
And of course, it goes back to the importance of supporting independent media, finding sources that present a more balanced view.
It's about diversifying your media diet, not just relying on the mainstream narrative.
And speaking of things that need attention, the source is also really concerned about the state of men's mental health. It's like it's saying men are suffering in silence. Their struggles are being ignored.
And there's this really alarming statistic. The suicide rate among men is 3 to 4 times higher than for women.
Yeah, that's a huge red flag. And the source attributes this, at least in part, to the pressures and expectations placed on men in today's society.
Like all these societal pressures, the expectations to be strong and stoic, the lack of support for men's emotional needs, it all adds up.
And it tells this really heartbreaking story about John. He's a father who loses custody of his children in a divorce and ends up taking his own life.
It's a stark reminder that we need to pay attention to men's mental health. We need to create spaces where they feel comfortable seeking help.
And the source offers some solutions here too. It emphasizes the importance of men connecting with each other, building strong male friendships, finding those healthy outlets for their masculinity.
It's about that sense of camaraderie, that brotherhood that can really help men through tough times.
It mentions things like men's groups, sports leagues, just regular get-togethers with friends. Just be around other guys who get it.
And it's not just about the source also stresses the importance of self-improvement. Like, invest in yourself, physically, mentally, emotionally.
Exercise, healthy eating, reading, learning new skills, like become the best version of yourself.
Take control of your life.
And one thing that the source is really passionate about is the importance of men being fathers.
It's like this is a crucial role for men, and it's a role that's often undervalued or even demonized in today's society.
The source is like, no, being a father is one of the most fulfilling and impactful things a man can do.
And it encourages men to fight for their rights as fathers, to challenge unfair custody arrangements, to be actively involved in their children's lives.
It's a really powerful message.
It is. And we've only just scratched the surface here. There's so much more to unpack.
Yeah, this is just the tip of the iceberg in this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground.
But there's more to come.
So stay tuned. We'll be right back after a quick break.
Welcome back. As we dig deeper into this, I'm really struck by how the source emphasizes the historical and ideological context of these issues. It's not just about what's happening now, it's about understanding how we got here.
Yeah, it's saying you can't really grasp the current state of men's experiences without looking back at how societal norms have evolved and the influence of various ideologies.
Exactly. And one ideology that the source really focuses on is feminism, particularly its intersection with Marxist theory.
Pretty bold claim, right?
It is, but the source breaks it down, arguing that this particular brand of feminism has created a framework that often portrays men as oppressors and women as victims.
And it claims that this framework has impacted everything from social norms to legal structure.
Right. And it gives specific examples of how this plays out in different areas of society.
Like academia, for instance.
Yeah, it argues that this framework is super prevalent in gender studies departments and really influences how young people are taught about gender roles and power dynamics.
It even goes so far as to compare some universities to re-education camps, claiming they indoctrinate students with feminist ideology.
Yeah, it's a pretty strong statement, and it reflects just how skeptical the source is of the way gender and power are presented in these settings.
It's like it's saying these institutions are supposed to be about open dialogue and critical thinking, but instead they're pushing a specific worldview that demonizes traditional men.
Right, and the source argues that this same framework has also permeated the media, influencing how men are portrayed in movies, TV shows, you name it.
It's like they're constantly bombarded with these negative portrayals. The bumbling fool, the emotionless robot, the violent predator.
And those portrayals shape public perception. Right. They contribute to this feeling that men are constantly under attack or on the defensive.
And it doesn't stop at media representation. The source even argues that this framework has influenced government policy.
Right, leading to what it calls the state as a weapon against men.
It's a pretty intense phrase.
It is, but it reflects the source's view that men are being systematically disadvantaged by certain policies that are often presented as promoting equality.
But in reality, they might have unintended consequences that actually harm men.
Right.
And it points to several examples of specific policy, things like child custody arrangements, divorce settlement,
Domestic violence programs, even healthcare funding.
It argues that these policies, while well-intentioned, can be biased against men.
Yeah, and they often fail to consider the unique needs and perspectives of men.
And this ties back to the whole financial aspect as well.
Right. The source argues that men are being financially exploited, and not just in divorce settlement.
It points to programs like affirmative action and diversity quotas, which it claims prioritize women's advancement in the workplace, sometimes at the expense of men.
And it also critiques the welfare state.
Yeah, it claims that the welfare state has actually incentivized single motherhood and created a system where men are often forced to be providers, even when they're no longer in a relationship with the mother of their children.
It's definitely a complex issue.
It is, and there's no easy answer. But the source is raising some important questions about the potential downsides of some of these policies and programs.
It's about recognizing that good intentions don't always lead to good outcomes.
Right. And another area where the source argues men are particularly vulnerable is in the realm of false accusation.
Yeah, and it brings up the hashtag #MeToo movement again, arguing that while it was initially meant to empower victims of sexual assault, it's created a climate where men are often presumed guilty until proven innocent.
Which is really concerning.
It is, and the source even shares this chilling story about a man whose life was completely destroyed by a false accusation. He loses his job, his reputation, custody of his children, everything, despite being completely innocent.
Yeah. It's a reminder that false accusations have a devastating impact on people's lives, and that we need a system that ensures fairness and protects the rights of both the accused and the accuser.
Exactly. It's about balance. And the source also criticizes what it calls performative wokeness, this idea of individuals or organizations publicly signaling their support for a feminist ideal.
Not necessarily because they actually believe in them, but to protect their reputations.
Right. It's like their virtue.
The source argues that this kind of performative wokeness creates a culture of fear and
where people are afraid to speak their minds or challenge the prevailing narrative.
because they might be labeled as sexist or misogynistic.
Exactly. And this ties back to the source's concerns about censorship and the suppression of dissenting viewpoints. Like, it's saying we need to be able to have open and honest discussions about these issues, even if they're uncomfortable.
It's about allowing for different perspectives, right?
Right. And not shutting down conversation or debate just because someone has a different viewpoint.
This is really making me think about how these larger societal trends that we've been talking about, how they actually trickle down and affect our personal lives, our relationships, everything.
Yeah, it's like the source is encouraging us to peel back those layers of societal conditioning and really question those assumptions that we often take for granted.
It's definitely a lot to think about.
It is, but I think that's the point, right? To get us thinking, to get us questioning. And I think in the next section, we're going to dive into some of the solutions and strategies that the source proposes.
Okay, so let's move on to that then. Welcome back to our deep dive. And we've been unpacking a lot of heavy stuff, haven't we? The challenges men face in modern society, the societal forces at play. But now it's time to get to the solutions, right?
Yeah, exactly. The source doesn't just leave us hanging. It actually offers a path forward, a way for men to navigate these challenges and reclaim their power.
So it's not about wallowing in victimhood.
No, absolutely not. It's about taking responsibility, becoming empowered. It's about recognizing that men need to stop making excuses and start taking control of their lives.
I like that, taking control. So where do we start?
Well, the source suggests that one of the first steps is understanding the tactics that are often used to manipulate men, to kind of keep them in check.
Tactics, like what?
It calls it the feminist playbook.
Okay, so it's getting right to the point.
It is. It breaks down these specific strategies that it claims are commonly used to silence dissent and enforce compliance with feminist ideology.
So it's not just about recognizing these broader societal trends, it's about being aware of the specific things that might be happening in your everyday life.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, wake up. These things are happening all around you, and you need to be able to spot them.
So give me some examples. What kind of tactics are we talking about?
Well, things like playing the victim card, accusing men of privilege, using terms like toxic masculinity to shut down any kind of criticism or disagreement.
It's like they're trying to control the narrative.
And the source is encouraging men to be aware of these tactics. Don't just automatically accept them as valid or unquestionable.
Don't just react emotionally.
Right. Take a step back, think critically, ask yourself, okay, what's really going on here? Why is this person saying this to me? What's their agenda?
Be more discerning.
Exactly.
And the source also warns about performative wokeness.
Right.
This whole idea of people just saying the right things to protect their reputation.
Yeah. It's like, are you really woke or are you just trying to look good?
It's virtue signaling.
It is. And the problem is, this kind of behavior creates a culture of fear and silence. People are afraid to speak their minds, to disagree, to challenge the narrative because they're afraid of being canceled.
So it's stifling open and honest discussion.
Exactly. And even if you don't agree with everything that's being said, it's important to allow for different
To have those debates.
Yes, to have those debates, to challenge each other intellectually, to be able to disagree respectfully without shutting down the conversation.
So how do we break out of this?
Well, the source argues that men need to be more proactive, more assertive. It's time to take back control of the narrative.
Okay, I like that. So what does that look like in practice?
Well, for one, it means speaking out, sharing your experiences, challenging the dominant narratives that portray men in a negative light.
It's about reclaiming your voice.
Exactly. For too long, men have allowed feminists to control the narrative, and it's time to push back. It's time for men to tell their own stories, to share their own perspectives on these issues.
So, create content, get involved in the conversation.
Yes, and support independent media. Find sources of information that align with your values and that provide a different perspective from the mainstream media, which often portrays men in a pretty negative light.
And what about political action?
That's important too. The source encourages men to get involved in the political process, support candidates who align with their values, advocate for policies that benefit men and families.
It's about taking action, not just sitting on the sidelines and complaining.
It's about recognizing that we have the power to shape the world around us, and we need to use that power.
But it's not all about politics.
No, it's about personal development too.
Self-improvement.
Right. The source really emphasizes the importance of investing in yourself physically, mentally, emotionally.
So exercise, healthy eating, reading, learning new skills, therapy if you need it.
All of that. It's about becoming the best version of yourself. It's about building your confidence, your resilience, your self-reliance.
And what about relationships?
Relationships are key, especially strong male friendships.
It's about finding your tribe.
Exact. Find those guys who get it, who you can be yourself around, who will support you and challenge you.
And the source also talks a lot about fatherhood, right?
Yeah, it's like a central theme. The source is adamant that fatherhood is one of the most fulfilling and impactful roles a man can have in life.
And it's a role that needs to be protected and defended.
Absolutely. The source encourages men to fight for their rights as fathers, to challenge unfair custody arrangements, to be actively involved in their children's lives.
It's about stepping up and being the best dad you can be.
And it's about recognizing the unique value that fathers bring to their families and to society as a whole.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have. It's been a journey.
We've talked about some really challenging stuff, but we've also explored some really empowering solutions.
And I think that's the key takeaway here. It's not about feeling defeated. It's about recognizing the challenges, understanding the forces at play, and then taking action to create a better future.
It's about reclaiming your power.
Exactly.
And if you're interested in learning more about these ideas, the source material we've been discussing is available as a book. We'll include links to Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books in the show notes.
Definitely check it out.
Until next time, keep those minds open and those conversations going.